Welcome to the Tehama Presents Smarter Connections. My name is Jaymes Davis, and I am the Director of Product Strategy for Tehama. But today you can consider me your product strategy for your business as far as what you're going through with COVID and the pandemic and the enterprises today. I kind of want to talk about that really specifically as we kind of go through where we're at today and kind of where we're going to go moving forward from a digital workplace transformation that we're all, being kind of forced to get into immediately as it is today. As you start looking at what was happening over the 2020, there was a big conversation that all of a sudden started happening in February and January, and these uh, things that started presenting themselves, as far as COVID-19 was considered, were surprising to a lot of people, and surprising to the effect it had in the overall pandemic perspective. Often when I was working in the EUC space prior to this point, pandemic had often been a conversation point we leveraged when we started talking about how remote connections would one day need to be created in case people needed to go. But those were really looking at natural disasters and things that had occurred before. Hadn't really looked at it from a plague and pandemic perspective as far as um, um, a very infectious virus. And so we started seeing this knee-jerk reaction in these real phases that we're in right now. Is that in that first phase, it was really respond, and it was a knee-jerk reaction. Over that period, a lot of people had good plans in play or pieces in play, and we started into getting into our recovery phase. And it was an interesting, right? Recovery phase is always great because you get a chance to really see what's happening, start figuring out what you need to do next. And then the last phase is really when we start looking at how to renew. How do we reset that new normal? And that new normal, as we perceive it today, looks at a lot of work from home is going to persist over the course of time. When I was a kid, one of the great things about this conversation was is that you went constantly into the office trying to do work in the office. I live in San Francisco, and it would take anywhere between an hour to 2 hours just to get into the business or the corporate location I was actually heading to consult at. And it's 2 hours back, if not more. And there's a lot of stuff that was happening in between. Your days are long, and you're trying to figure out how can I work more remote. The good thing is that I was technically I was enabling remote work, so it was really well received once I got it in play. And that was great. And remote work was a conversation from an executive perspective, or it was always a conversation from a very diamond in the rough group or business unit that could take advantage of the ability of a virtual desktop infrastructure, or the ability of taking advantage of the remote capabilities it provided. And that's really where we started focusing a lot of our EUC, VDI, server-based computing technologies during that period in time. And consequently, things definitely needed to happen, because when we got to phase one, we everyone took that tactical solution that we had put into play, and all of a sudden, it became get everybody online tomorrow, because nobody's going anywhere. And I can imagine every IT department currently looking at this situation like, oh my God, what's happening? Right? It's like, oh, how am I going to do this work from home? How do I send everybody back and actually start getting people prepared to do that? If I had a VPN, or if we were leveraging VPN technologies, what were the capabilities of my VPN concentrators, or my VPN infrastructure, or my VDI infrastructure at that fact, right? Or do I have enough laptops spaced against the current purchasing plan to actually provide it for everybody who needed to go home? There were a lot of capabilities that started talking about how you were able to spin up new laptop implementations or hand out laptops to customers, or I'm sorry, hand out laptops to people who need to go home. You had situations where you had to, people who were running to extend their, Citrix licensing or their VDI licensing or any of their capabilities to increase the amount of users who are now needing to pile on from a remote location or remote capability. And this, it was something that we all, again, prepared for when we started thinking about remote work. And as time progressed, you could see more and more people moving outside the firewall and starting to have BYOD or have some of these capabilities for accessing application sets. But there are always these core applications, the ones that help, the line of business that you may be in that are data center bound or data center specific in this situation that you now needed to get access for these people to get access to in a much more hastily way or capability. So, and unfortunately, all those challenges didn't change, right? Just because you decided that we needed to get all the people on, the security problem didn't change. And the security problem that existed there already was laptops are stolen. The security problems that existed there already were encrypted disks aren't as secure when you can do cold boots. Privileged access is how you got into environments, and we're in the most vulnerable state where you are today, in which, because these compliances and so forth were reduced and the risk were reduced, the ability for people to get in, again, if you didn't have a robust identity and access management system prior to this point, there's a lot of password sharing that probably went on, or there was a lot of stagnant capabilities or accounts that needed to be activated or created during this mayhem that was in play. And I think, that's really important that you start looking at it, because most privileged access is how people get in and actually abuse the systems that are in play to get elevated privileges into other systems that are in play. And, often, VPN was how they got in. But VPN in itself is not a security technology, whereas it's a more of a connection technology. It doesn't provide you the ability to segregate your TCP stack and allow for certain things to go back by leveraging split tunneling. Absolutely. But that doesn't protect the machine that you're on from the capabilities or malware or internet things that happen prior to you turning on the VPN that may or may not want to ride the channel down that VPN into your organization. And I think those are the things that, as we started extending this, we again, need and supply and demand sometimes trump the security that was in play or that needed to be in play to really get these things going. So now we've got an entire enterprise that's had to open its boundaries and open itself up to these type of things that are in play. Now, my favorite thing, though, that happened during this time period was often we would get the conversation back from our customers or people that were looking at getting into Tehama, as far as, well, I've got, Zoom, or I've got GoToMeeting, and this is how we're going to prevail. And those work definitely for the video and the audio meetings that were necessary in a lot of situations, but that doesn't, give you access to sensitive data or data center access or resources in any way, shape, or form. So it definitely becomes harder, but even more so, it became much more of a risk, because they created a system in which there was a lot of people who hadn't leveraged Zoom and those type of collaboration tools from home, and exposed a larger portion of data or intellectual or PII data than they may or may not know during the time that they were first getting in. One of my good friends, Dane Young, that runs Young Tech, he actually put together an IT COVID task force group, which we ended up getting involved, because they found that there's so many people that were out there that actually needed help with and getting their environment set up to do this. Often I'd get calls from people who, were personal friends of mine or, family members who were explaining how they were getting back to work. Some of them had to leave so much immediately that they were leveraging a team viewer and leveraging team viewer to get back to their desktops. And others were sharing laptops in which they would go in and be able to swap a laptop with somebody who didn't have a laptop so that they could do work this week versus doing work next week. So there was a lot of stuff that happened during that first phase and that first phase of reactionary movements that caused us to really scramble to get access to tool sets. And I appreciate Dane Young and their IT COVID task force who really started gathering together EUC individuals and people who could help present solutions for this conversation as they started moving forward. And, that's really great because we started moving into that secondary phase, right? That phase two, the ability to really look at recovery, right? Now, okay, everybody, we figured this out, right? Our VPN is now oversubscribed. We now know that we need another one, or we need additional capabilities. Or I've been in a situation where I needed additional licenses and I was able to get additional licenses, but forgot that I needed additional hardware to support those licenses. And those are the situations that you got into when you're trying to recover from this particular scenario that everybody had to do the work from home or stay at home type pieces in play. It was around getting very secure and getting very strategic. And then you got something else in which we realized that it is affecting everyone and everywhere. And your kids are now at home, and your wife is at home working on her stuff. And all of a sudden, this was the first time personally I'd ever had a line to my printer to wait on getting stuff printed. And those are the things that we started looking at these communal things as now these laptops that I have, this laptop needs to print something, my wife can't print it, so she has to log on through that piece. And of course her IT department says that they've got to have their own MDM software on there before it's able to allow her to get in. And it's like, oh my God, there's so many things. My kids need to print something, and he needs to print something. He's taking his USB back and forth between his dirty machine and my clean machine. And I don't know what's happening, man. It's going crazy. And that's the battleground that got created all of a sudden. It was no longer just work from home, like, hey, I can work from home and I'm a remote worker and times I get there and then get back. It was something really serious. It was some of these devices were communal devices because my kids had to go to work and my wife had to work on the same things, as well as all the different pressures of trying to do my job from home that is all brand new. So those we're starting to see where our security holes lied, because our security, when you started thinking about it, and again, taking real account of some of these things that I got a chance to see on the IT COVID channel, as well as just in general conversations with people. One person had their VPN connected to their environment, and their child was on playing Fortnite, and all their internet traffic. There was no split tunneling; was going directly back through the corporate network. And those are the type of things that happen when you start looking at the communal devices. Am I allowing, they got access to this, he downloaded something, he uploaded something. These are now on these devices, and it's now more important to really look at what's happening on those particular devices. Then it's also the other struggles, the struggles of trying to get back home, right? The struggles of trying to really put getting back to the office, right? And that was a staggered hours or staggered time periods in which people could come in or out of the office, sometimes limited hours. But more importantly, there was a large set of new policies that needed to be in place for this to really transpire and really work in today's, current crisis that we're in today, right? There's a lot that needed to go into play. And, it doesn't help that COVID-19 related cyber attacks are on the rise. The very first indicator of this particular problem was the John Hopkins website. That John Hopkins website in itself had so many things as far as a great tracker was going in, but malware was getting injected into the browser. Separate sites were being created. If you did have split tunneling enabled, which was sometimes the only route you could go to get the oversubscribed users in, that split tunneling was subject to a lot of phishing attacks, right? You got an email that pointed you to this point, or do you see the COVID-19 related cases in your area? Those were great. They cyber attacks were great. They didn't have a stay-at-home policy, just so we're all clear. They were already at home hacking into stuff left and right. And I think that was very important to think about when you start looking at that recovery and getting into that. Is it secure, and how is it strategic? How do I get that coverage that I need to get across that whole thing? And then, like I said, now that these people are working from home, you have children in the background and you have different things that are going on in the environment. What are your work from home policies? There weren't any policies that people had as a general sense, like that need to be in play in some of these situations of access, sensitivity of data, understanding that the ability for you to compromise a network is much greater now. What happens when I get compromised, or something happens and I didn't do my Zoom update of the patch file, and all of a sudden my machine is compromised, and the thing that I had all my kids' pictures on and all the stuff that was there, and now it's dead. It's a brick. How do I get either my new machine? How do I get my stuff back? How is that shared security model now with my individual users? Right? Because it's a shared security model that I have to look at, because all of them are being leveraged in this way. So having an understanding of the right work from home policies was key to our next piece of going secure and going strategic to a better work balance and a better workforce conversation that we start moving into. This is where we really start getting into bringing it into that phase 3, getting to that next stage that we've been trying to get to, where it's about that renewal, those smart connections. How do I get to that next level of figuring out where and what and how, right? This I love, this other meme that people put together that was like, this is the best catalyst for digital transformation, and the digital transformation at workplace is key. And when I talk about digital workplace transformation, it's different than just looking at it from whether or not I'm delivering an EUC experience or not. It's really about understanding from a user-centric perspective what resources and capabilities are necessary for my individual contributors to actually become great knowledge workers, delivering support and capabilities for them. And if I don't ask these questions of who are the users and what's their job function, there was 30% of most IT enterprises supported work from home or remote working prior to this point, where there was, telecommuting 1 or 2 days a week, or as travel was permeant for everyone, it was pretty easy to get around. And all of a sudden, when you went from that 30 to 48%, which is one of some of these Gartner studies that look at, all of a sudden these new type of things had to be figured out, like how can I work remote in this particular space? And when you did, what was the things that you gave up, or the compliances that you did keep in play to make that support and make that happen? What kind of applications did they need access to, right? That line of business and that type of capability. If I was a Linux developer or a software developer or a game developer, could I go home and leverage my own home PC? Whereas, my PC at work is, multiple, generations ahead. With the appropriate GPUs and CPUs. If I do bring it home, again, am I all the compute power, the electricity, and so forth that's here? Are those things now? Am I paying for those as a home worker? And so I really started having to really look at what's happening when you start thinking about digital workplace transformation is, it was the user even in the US, the user external, because that's, happened with, people who were stuck outside of the country. When the pandemic and the things that closed, people were stuck outside the country and there was an urgency to get access to certain data, but it was only temporary in that situation. And so a lot of the questions had to become very user centric. They also become very dynamic. They also become, in the sense, in a way, they have to adjust towards the user because users are being more mobile from that perspective, or more importantly, they're being less mobile in that home, which is outside of the enterprise perimeter. And so, people often ask me about, your Tehama's competitors and what do you see from a competitive perspective, and I always tell them it's basically latent pain. It's understanding latent pain comes in two forms. That first form is that I have looked at this project and looked at this particular thing like remote work or such, and I've looked at all the options, and the only thing I can come up with is laptop because it's less complex than all the other solutions like DAS or VDI or whatever that's out there. I've settled on that particular one. Or latent painting comes also from cost, in which it's too costly because I would have to, put all these things together to make this orchestration work in the way that it needs to work to make this actually work out for me. And so that was one of the things that you started looking at when you see Tehama versus incumbent solutions, because Tehama is really that first step of a smart connection. And what do I mean by that? Tehama's first step is that Tehama is a platform. It's a platform for delivering work, similar to what you would think of when you think about Uber, in the factoring of a platform. The platform of Uber, if you think about it, takes away the responsibility of the individual user from owning insurance on a car, from having to get tires created or done, of having to change the oil or get the tune-ups of the car happening as he's trying to get back and forth to work. Instead, he can leverage a platform which delivers the services that he needs to allow him to get to work in a value-based scenario, so that it's very easy to get it done. And that's that smarter connection. That's the Uberish portion of what we're describing here, and that's what the Tehama is. Tehama, when you compare it towards additional things like VDI or DAS, those things, those areas are much more complex. They require additional things that are part of an existing pipeline, right? Your pipeline strategies that are in play today are build the items, get me a SAN, get me some servers, call this guy, call that guy, let's put all these things together and see what we can actually get going. And when business change happens, there's no difference as far as expandability or scalability except for additional pieces of the pipeline. And that's where we strive to be really different, is that Tehama is a platform. Tehama leverages an idea in which you can be very productive in less than an hour. Within 1 hour, I can create a Tehama room. I can invite those users into the Tehama room. I can then grant access to those resources within the Tehama room specifically. And I can then add users to desktops that have access to those particular resources. And they can start working. They'll connect in very easily, very quickly, regardless of the type of device they have. And for those very technical people, I made sure I put in the most technical slide I could find. And you can pause it here and look. Or as just an example, our Tehama architecture works in really three major components. The first components are gateway that goes into your corporate location. It's a virtual appliance, it's a scripting, it's a Linux box that you have that's local to you, and it talks outbound. And it talks outbound to our room that we spin up in AWS for AWS WORKSPACES is what we're currently leveraging today. And when you spin up those particular desktops in the cloud, those desktops have direct access to the resources back in the corporate environment through the gateway tunnel. And so now that desktop seems as if it's actually on the actual same environment as the resource. So a database that I'm looking at, I can still talk to it directly at 10.x without having to worry about conflicts or things on the other side. And how I'm connecting to that virtual desktop as an individual user is I'm leveraging PC over IP to connect to that particular desktop. And I'm being able to get a very vivid, very immersive connectivity to a virtual desktop. And in that virtual desktop, again, I have access to resources that are inside of the room that help provide a level of secure capability and as well provide a level of collaboration in some of the situations that we're using today. So I have a secret vault that's in there that you can put in privileged access management, in which if you're consulting and you're leveraging different access points or needing credentials from the enterprise to provide you access to resources, instead they can provide access or resources to the room through the secret vault and allow you to access that. And then when necessary, you can revoke those particular credentials out of the vault specifically. And have that type of thing where the end user who's coming in never knew what the actual password or the username was, because they're leveraging the actual vault to do the actual login that they're using. Or you can use our file vault that's in that room that you can have access to, that allows you to upload different files directly into that environment specifically. So a lot of the stuff that you're dealing with when you're thinking about a spin-up environment, this is a Tehama-based environment, which is a platform in which if I have a gateway that's in play, I can easily connect to it and spin up multiple rooms across the different regions, across the different worlds. Rooms allow for those smart connections. I can have a room in which I can be very project-based or enterprise-based, in which it could be the networking guys, or it could be a business unit like the HR department, who may or may not be inside of a room specifically, and they'll get access to the same resources as all the rest of the people in that room, as well as access to file vaults and secret vault capabilities directly inside of that environment. Or I could switch it around. I can have the providers that I need to have come in and actually do work inside of my environment connect in via my room, and they can leverage their own user accounts and capabilities, and then I can provide approval or revoke approval based on the provider or the container. And I don't have to create them separate user accounts to get into it. It's federated directly within the room itself based against SAML capabilities as such. And so organizationally, I can have them come into a single room. And then you have your last piece, which is geographically. These smart connections allow us to spin up desktops as if I'm a North American company and I actually have users who are coming in from Eastern Europe because of the stay at home that's been spun up. I can spin up a room that's closer to them so that they can get access to those particular desktop and resources, but still have the data center back in North America that they're getting direct access to via that gateway. A lot of the ability around smart connections comes from the idea of defining this particular type of platform and developing it in a way in which it's a very simple delivery. You can have a room. The room is going to be always on, standard or enterprise. You have up to 400 users within a room. And those desktops can be either on demand, in which if people are using them consistently, though they are always on desktop is a much better solution. But in a situation where they need to be, they may or may not be using it on a consistent basis, then on demand can actually save you money in your consulting or on your compute environment as you're delivering on these type of services. And then of course we have support and security. It's our support that allows your ability to look at your L1, such as password revocation, a connection to desktops and things like that, as part of the platform. So you're not extending additional resources to get people connected into the environment. If they're having problems or issues that they're trying to get on, or they're having issues being able to connect in, RL1 from the platform perspective allows for that to happen for you. So it's a simplistic system. Instead of having a large set of different risks based on the different components I put together and that I can have, whether it be session recording, secure envelope, perimeters, 2FA, MFA, all those particular pieces are delivered as a single platform of using Tehama. And to really view that point, I'm going to go ahead and do the last demo leveraging a lot of the IGEL capability that we actually have in play here as well. We've integrated into an IGEL client. It's a custom partition in which you can deliver it directly on a UD Pocket and directly get into a desktop regardless of the type of endpoint or device. I'll go ahead and play out this particular use case here. So Craig Irwin has one of our channel sales department. He's a VP of sales and actually does a large set of driving around and going around into different areas. I'm leveraging his video that was quite a few years back, I think last year, where we started looking at high-risk regions and taking a UD Pocket and directly connecting it to a device, and off you went. When we started talking about those high-risk regions, we really never thought that they would actually be at home. And that they would actually be in a spot in which, literally in my house, I can use a UD Pocket to keep my data secure. I can boot into it, get access to a full desktop, and have capabilities inside of my data center, like if I'm directly standing next to it, and know that it's a secure chain of trust, leveraging the IGEL UD Pocket or an IGEL Thin client to connect into my desktop environment. So here you're looking at, again, him connecting directly in through our web UI, utilizing a UD Pocket. He's able to launch his desktop by coming into the web UI, choosing that desktop, it launches, and then he's into the desktop itself, able to work with a Windows-based environment very quickly and very easily, without any particular support or help from any other departments that necessary there. It is a spin up and spin down type environment in which you can spin up users that need access to desktops, and when you find that you're going to have more people in there come to home, or more people who are going to start coming into the office, you can then reduce the number of desktops that you have externally that people are accessing as well, and then again worry about the economies of scale and gain from the operational savings that you can gain without having to deal with a large capex delivered on this particular solution. So again, a lot of our customers who are leveraging us today look at us from a perspective of a platform, because we're very easy to spin up, get you locked directly into play, so that as you're looking at building these smarter connections for your next stage and your renewal stage, leverage something of this nature that allows it as a platform so that you're able to get your actual value during the time when you need it the most. Again, this is all secured. It's a SOC 2 Type 2 compliant environment, has all the necessary controls that are in play for you to really look at an auditable, evidence-based delivery of service and work, both from third-party contractors or employees, all the way through the gambit that comes into play. So if there are any other questions, or I'm going to really leave you with this, Tehama is the fastest and easiest and most secure way for you to deliver services today in a work from home based environment.